Hey guys, welcome to my channel Harish Automation Talks. So as part of our series Selenium automation with Java programming, let's discuss about a Selenium architecture today. Okay, let's discuss about Selenium 3 architecture, Selenium 4 architecture, difference between Selenium 3 and Selenium 4 architecture, and an advantages of Selenium 4 architecture over a Selenium 3 architecture. So let's not wait and get into the actual topics. So this is a Selenium 3 architecture. First, let's try to understand each one of these first. So like what is the Selenium client libraries, what is the JSON wire protocol, what are the browser drivers, and what are the real browsers. So let's start with this real browsers. So by seeing this, you might have got like what the real browsers mean. So in our mobile we use this Chrome browser, right? So this is the same one. So in our day-to-day life, we use this Chrome browser, Firefox. Few people might use this Internet Explorer and the Microsoft Edge. So these are the real browsers what we regularly use, right? And let's see what is this browser drivers. So for each browser, let's say for Chrome, for each browser there is a specific driver created. Okay, for Chrome we have a Chrome driver, for Firefox we have a Firefox driver. Similarly, for Internet Explorer we have some Internet Explorer driver, and for the Microsoft Edge we have a Microsoft Edge driver. But why do we need these browser drivers? What is the job of these browser drivers? So so let's say we are writing a Selenium test, right? So we are writing a Selenium test to perform some task. Let's say we are writing for to automate the login page, right? We have to enter the username, we have to enter the password, we have to click on the login button. So we are sending that request and giving it to this browser driver. So these browser drivers send the commands to the real browsers. So instead of sending that commands directly to the real browsers, these browser drivers act as an mediator to send the commands to the real browsers. Okay, let's discuss more about this later, but the basically that is what this browser driver does, and we have few more things. Let's discuss about that later. And what is this JSON wire protocol? So this JSON wire protocol, it's a mediator between the Selenium client libraries and the browser drivers. Okay, so there is a specific job what this JSON wire protocol does. But before explaining that, I wanted to explain the Selenium client libraries. Okay, so what this Selenium client libraries actually? So this is the place where we actually write our Selenium tests. Okay, we write our Selenium test in a specific language. It could be a Python, Java, C Sharp, Perl, Ruby, etc. It could be some programming language. But in our series we are using Java, right? So let's say we have written a Selenium scripts using Java. So once we write the test script and once we execute it, the entire Selenium script will get converted into a JSON format, and that JSON format, that script will be sent to the browser drivers. So as I said, we have written a script to automate the login page, like entering the username, password, and click on the login button. And also we have written here something that it should get executed in the Chrome browser. Okay, so this JSON wire protocol has given the request to the browser driver to you enter the username, enter the password, and click on the login button in a Chrome. Okay, so this request is given to the Chrome driver, and this Chrome driver will give the will send the commands to the actual real browser, and that entire task will be performed here on the real browser. And once done, it will give back the response to the browser driver, and this browser driver wraps up the response and gives back to the JSON wire protocol, and this JSON wire protocol deserializes the JSON and gives the response back to the Selenium client libraries. Okay, by this you might have got some information. You might have understood a bit, like we are writing the test here, and this test is converting into a JSON format, and that is giving the request to the browser driver, and this browser driver is giving the commands to the real browser to execute that particular task, and we are getting the response back from here and from here to here and from here to here. So basically this Selenium client libraries, we call it as a client, and this browser driver we call it as a server. So by this you might have got some doubts here. So we are writing the test scripts here and it was executing it in the real browsers. So but why these two are coming into the picture? Why can't we directly write the Selenium script and directly execute these scripts on the real browsers? Okay, there are some let's discuss about these browser drivers first. Okay, so there are some security reasons why we are not directly sending the Selenium scripts to the real browsers, why we need these browser drivers in between. Okay, there are some security reasons. So these web browsers are designed with the security, I mean we are keeping in mind, with the security keeping in mind, these web browsers are designed. So if we, I mean allowing these external scripts to send to send the commands directly to these browsers. So right now these browser drivers are sending the commands to the real browsers, right? So but if we allow these external scripts to send this command directly to the browsers, there could be a security risk, right? So this browser drivers is acting as an intermediary to ensure that these any automation actions that are taken with the within the security boundaries with the and the defined by this browser. Got? And not just the security, there is some error handling. So this browser driver handles the errors. Actually this browser driver handles the errors and the exceptions. So they provide the detailed information about what went wrong during the automation, right? If you directly send the commands from Selenium client libraries to the real browsers, it will execute, let's say these two are not there, it will execute, but it won't give the proper reason where it got failed. That these browser drivers will take care. Okay, so these browser drivers will provide the detailed information about what went wrong during the automation. So that will make easier us to debug or troubleshoot the issues, right? So directly sending these commands to the browser might result like less information. We might not get much information about what went wrong. Got it? So that is why we are not just directly sending the commands from Selenium client libraries to the real browsers. Got it? So right, and let's discuss about why a JSON wire protocol is required here and why it is converting this entire test scripts into the JSON, and that JSON is giving to the browser drivers. So why we need this JSON wire protocol here? Okay, so let's say this Selenium client libraries we are returning some in some language. Let's talk it in a generic way. Okay, this is a person A and this browser drivers, I mean this client is a person A, this server is a person B. Okay, this person knows only a Hindi language, and the person A knows only Hindi language and person B knows only English. It doesn't understand, the Selenium client libraries doesn't understand the language of browser drivers, and the browser driver doesn't understand the language of Selenium client libraries. So here is where JSON wire protocol it acts as a translator between these two guys. Got it? So this Selenium client libraries, it will convert to JSON and that request will be given to a browser drivers. But you might have got some other doubt. So for these two guys, they don't understand each other's language. So here we are using the JSON wire protocol as a translator and or as a translator or a mediator, and taking the request from Selenium client libraries and giving it to a browser, right? But why these two can communicate directly without having any mediator, right? That you will understand in a Selenium 4 architecture. Okay, so yeah, this is about the Selenium 3 architecture actually. Okay, let's go to the Selenium 4. I mean the whatever I've discussed now, the entire thing I've written it here. Okay, I'll share this in the description. You might if you had any doubts you can see this, or still if you have you can comment down, I can answer it. Now let's talk about the Selenium 4 architecture. So the Selenium 4 architecture, it was exactly similar to the Selenium 3 architecture, but the only difference is the W3C protocol. If you observe clearly, here in the Selenium 3 we are using JSON wire protocol, but here we are using W3C protocol. So what is this W3C protocol? So W3C stands for World Wide Web Consortium. So it is an international community that develops and maintains the standards and guidelines for the World Wide Web. So this W3C it gives the guidelines, and it will give us the standards, right? So if you see the browsers, all the browsers and the browser drivers are in a W3C standards. I mean, when they developed it, they followed this W3C standards, the browsers and the browser drivers. The only thing, the Selenium WebDriver is not following the W3C standards till Selenium 3.8. Okay, so till that time it was Selenium WebDriver is not following the W3C standards. So for that reason, if you see it here in the Selenium 3 architecture, it was converting this entire Selenium test into a JSON, and that is giving to a browser driver. But here, this now in a Selenium 4, this our Selenium WebDriver is also following the W3C standard. So now we don't need any JSON wire protocol here. So I told you, right? So like why these Selenium client libraries and browser drivers are using this JSON wire protocol, but why these browser drivers and the real browsers are not having any mediator? So this is the reason, right? So this browser, I told you another thing also, like this guy doesn't understand his language and this guy doesn't understand his language. So that is the reason we have this in between to make them understand, right? So but here the browsers is following the W3C standards, and the browser drivers are also following the W3C standards. So these guy knows his language and this guy knows his language, so we don't need any mediator in between. So these guy can directly communicate, these browser drivers can directly communicate with the specific browsers. So now when from Selenium 4 we have this Selenium WebDriver is also following this W3C protocol. Now these guy, let's say as I said, this guy knows only Hindi and this guy knows only English, right? Now what happened, we can assume that this guy learned English and this guy learned Hindi, right? So now this guy can understand his language and this guy can understand his language. Now there is no, we don't need any mediator in between. He can directly communicate with the browser drivers, and the browser drivers directly can communicate with the actual real browsers. So there are some advantages of removing this JSON wire protocol. Since Selenium WebDriver is following this W3C protocol, right? So this can directly communicate with browser drivers. So now the execution speed will get increased, because here it needs to convert it into the JSON first, and that should give the request to the browser drivers, and here the browser driver sends the commands to the real browser and it gives response back to here. Once we get the response here, this should deserialize it and have to send it to the Selenium client libraries. Basically it should encode and decode. So there is a process here, but when it comes to the Selenium 4, there is no process. It is directly communicating with the browser drivers, right? So it saves a lot of time. Actually the execution time will get increased. Getting it right? And what is the difference between the Selenium 3 and the Selenium 4 architecture? Most of the things we have already discussed. The main drawback of Selenium 3 architecture is the JSON wire protocol. As I said, it was that there is no direct communication between the client and the server. As I said, right, this is a client and this is the server, and the JSON wire protocol acts as a mediator between client libraries and the WebDriver. The client and the server, as I told, right? Because the server doesn't understand the programming language but only the protocols. So hence it has the process of serialization. I said, right, some encoding and decoding, serialization. It should convert the objects to the JSON, and after we get the response, it should deserialize, like it should convert the JSON back to the object. So this results sometimes in the exception. So this if this process happens, so we might get some exceptions, and there might be a, so I mean this process should happen, right? So in that case we might this test execution might be slower, so that kind of things might happen, right? Now if you see, I mean before Selenium 4, so all the browsers and all the browser drivers are in the in this Selenium architecture follows this W3C, except the Selenium 3 WebDriver, right? So that is what I was mentioned here. In the Selenium 3, the main drawback is the JSON wire protocol. So now in the Selenium 3, if you see, these real browsers are following the W3C standards. These browser drivers are also following the W3C standards. Only the Selenium WebDriver is not following the W3C standards. So that is why we have to encode and decode, I mean the serialize and deserialize and all these things, and the execution time will be slower and all this. But when it comes to a Selenium 4, where Selenium WebDriver is also following this W3C protocol, so we can directly communicate with this browser driver, so the execution time will get increased. And what is the advantages? Okay, so the advantages are the standards will get increased, I mean the common code. So let's say you might have observed that you're running the scripts in a Chrome browser, and if you try to run the same script in the Firefox, most of the times you might not get the issues, but sometimes you might face some issues that it won't run in a Chrome, in Firefox, or in Edge, or in Internet Explorer. So now this entire browser drivers and the Selenium WebDriver, so these three are following this W3C standards, this W3C protocol. We might not see that issues now. The other thing is the stability, right? The reduction in the different runtime browser exception. So since all these three are following the W3C protocols, so we might so let's say we might have some we might get some exceptions like element not visible exception kind of things, right? So that kind of exceptions we might not see now, right? And see, let's say you have the element in the DOM, but it was not able to identify, right? But that kind of it is not able to identify, so that kind of exceptions, it will be resolved in the Selenium 4. And the other thing is the actions API. We have the actions API in a Selenium, where we if you want to drag and drop a thing in application, so this actions API will be used. Here we have like multiple keyboard, I mean the new features which are added in Selenium 4 is like multiple keyboard and mouse actions allowed, like 2 key press. Like if you want to press a button twice, like you have to click the shift twice, so you can use that. And the other thing is like you want to zoom in or zoom out, so these kind of operations are added in this actions API, right? So yeah, this is about the Selenium 3 and the Selenium 4 architectures. Okay, you might, if you have any doubts, please you can just comment, I can answer you on that. And this is about today. Please don't forget to subscribe, like and share. And yeah, thank you very much.